Phineas Cole, step back from the vision packet.
That presentation's for the church, not for a courtroom.
The donor database says those gifts was restricted to construction.
People gave toward a future. Futures do not build on a neat schedule.
Phineas Cole operated without oversight for 14 years as senior pastor of Silverbrook Worship Center in Mississippi. 2,500 congregants trusted him completely. Not one person checked.
The indictment says the construction of spending gift fund.
You're taking a faith campaign and flattening it into a spreadsheet.
He would repeat that phrase 17 times over the next 4 hours. By the end of that same week, a forensic accountant would produce a single 16-page spreadsheet comparing every restricted building fund donation Silverbrook Worship Center had received across 4 years against every dollar of actual construction work paid to a verifiable contractor. The gap between those two numbers was $2,800,000. Every cent of it belonged to the congregation. None of it had built a sanctuary. Before we go any further, I have to ask, have you ever put money into a collection plate or written a check with a specific purpose on the memo line and simply trusted that it was going where they said it would? Drop a comment below and tell me. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. This channel covers accountability cases like this every single week, and the next one is already worse than this. Phineas Ellis Cole was born in April of 1972 in Tupelo, Mississippi, the youngest of 3 children. His father sold farm and small business insurance out of a 2-room storefront on Gloucester Street. His mother taught 7th grade choral music at the local junior high for 29 years and directed the youth choir at the family's Baptist church on Sunday mornings. The Coles were not wealthy. They were the kind of family that showed up early to church to fold the bulletins and stayed late to stack folding chairs. Phineas was singing solos in front of a sanctuary before he was 10 years old. By 15, he was leading the Wednesday night youth devotional. By 17, he had told his mother he intended to preach for a living. He worked the afternoon shift at a Dairy Queen on West Main Street through his last 2 years of high school for $4.25 an hour. His high school yearbook quote was from the book of Jeremiah. His graduating class of 86 students voted him most likely to become a preacher, and he took it as a prophecy. He enrolled at Mississippi College, a small Baptist school in Clinton, in the fall of 1990. He majored in Christian studies, minored in communications, and worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore. Professors described him in their notes as articulate, focused, and hungry for platform. One evaluation, preserved in his academic file, called him a natural pulpit voice with unusual maturity for his age. He graduated in '94 and drove north to Louisville, Kentucky, to enroll at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. 3 years of Greek, Hebrew, systematic theology, and homiletics. He served as a preaching intern at a small church in Jeffersonville, Indiana, on weekends. His seminary thesis was on the pastoral responsibility of stewardship. He wrote it in 6 weeks and defended it without notes. He came back to Mississippi in '97 and took a job as associate pastor at Beulah Trace Community Church in Jackson, a congregation of about 400 that met in a converted grocery store off Interstate 55. Starting salary, $26,000 a year, plus a small housing allowance. He met his wife Deborah at a church retreat in Oxford that same summer. She was a public school reading specialist. They married a year later. For 12 years, he built a resume the old-fashioned way. He preached the funerals, he counseled the marriages, he sat with the dying, he baptized the newborns. He built a reputation across the Mississippi Baptist Convention as a young pastor who could hold a room. By 2009, he was preaching at 4 to 5 conferences a year across the Southeast. His salary at Beulah Trace had grown to $62,000, and his family had grown to include 2 daughters. In the summer of 2010, the pulpit committee of Silverbrook Worship Center in Silverbrook, Mississippi, reached out to him. Silverbrook was a growing non-denominational church of about 1,200, meeting in a leased industrial building on the north side of town. Their founding pastor had retired, and they wanted a successor with pulpit presence and a growth vision. They offered Phineas Cole a starting salary of $92,000, a parsonage allowance, and effective executive authority over the church's day-to-day operations. He accepted the call in August of 2010. he preached his first sermon at Silverbrook on the second Sunday of September. Attendance that Sunday was 1,340. His subject was faithfulness in small things. The elder board, in their meeting minutes from the following Tuesday, called it the best first Sunday they had ever seen from a pastor. He would preach at Silverbrook for the next 14 years. Attendance would nearly double. And somewhere in the middle of that run, a plan would begin to form that no one in that sanctuary saw coming. Silverbrook Worship Center was, by American church standards, medium-sized and quietly influential. By 2019, the congregation counted 2,500 people through the doors on an average Sunday morning across 2 services. The staff had grown to 23, including 4 ministerial associates, a youth pastor, a worship leader, and a bookkeeper who worked 3 days a week. The building the church actually met in was, by any honest description, a compromise. It was a former warehouse and industrial supply outlet that had been converted with painted concrete floors, a folding stage, and rows of upholstered stackable chairs. The lobby was a hallway. The children's ministry ran out of 3 portable classroom trailers behind the parking lot. On any Sunday that it rained, the youth pastor's shoes stayed wet from the walk between the trailers and the main building. The congregation wanted a real church. Everyone knew it. And in 2017, Phineas Quoll had stood on that folding stage and told them they were going to build one. He called the project Silverbrook Vision, 10,000 square feet of new sanctuary, a dedicated family ministry building with permanent classrooms, a youth wing, a fellowship hall large enough to host a wedding reception. Total projected cost, $12 million, to be raised across a 7-year capital campaign. He asked every household in the church to pray, to sacrifice, and to pledge. The campaign was structured the way capital campaigns are structured in every American church. Families made written pledges. Those pledges were tracked in a donor database. Every gift toward the building came in with a specific restriction, either written on a check memo line, marked on an offering envelope, or entered into the church's online giving platform under the building fund category. Under Mississippi civil law, and under a body of nonprofit accounting standards known as donor restriction rules, a gift given to a nonprofit for a specific restricted purpose can only lawfully be spent on that purpose. Restricted funds are not the pastor's money. They are not the elder board's money. They are not even the church's money in the general sense. They are trust funds held on behalf of the donors who gave them, and they can only be released against the purpose the donor named. That framework was explained in the campaign brochure. It was preached from the pulpit. It was written into the donor commitment cards congregants signed and put in their kitchen drawers. Some households pledged $5,000 over 7 years. Some pledged $50,000. A retired couple in the second row pledged the majority of their inheritance from a mother-in-law who had died the year before, $80,000, given specifically so that their grandchildren would grow up worshiping in a permanent sanctuary. The elder board that was supposed to oversee this money was made up of 9 volunteer congregants: a cardiologist, a middle school principal, 2 small business owners, a retired banker, a homemaker who kept the meeting minutes, an insurance broker, an attorney who mostly did residential closings, and a commercial real estate developer named Warren Aldridge. They met monthly in a conference room off the main hallway. They approved the annual budget. They received quarterly financial summaries. Every one of those summaries was prepared by Phineas Quoll himself. The church did not have an independent auditor. It did not run its books through an outside accounting firm. It had a part-time bookkeeper who processed weekly deposits and cut checks against invoices that the senior pastor signed off on. The building fund had its own separate bank account, in accordance with donor restriction principles, but the account signatory of record on that account was the senior pastor. The elder board had never asked for a building fund audit. They had never asked for the invoices behind the summaries. They had never asked why the construction was falling behind schedule. They trusted the pastor. They had been trusting him for years. That trust was about to be tested. The first diverted transfer moved out of the Silverbrook Vision Building Fund on a Tuesday morning in March of 2020. 3 days after Mississippi issued its statewide stay-at-home order for the pandemic. The amount was $42,000. The stated purpose, entered by hand on the church's accounting ledger, was payment to a firm called Fieldstone Facility Planning LLC for preliminary site development consulting. Fieldstone Facility Planning LLC had been incorporated with the Mississippi Secretary of State 4 weeks earlier. Its registered agent was Phineas Quall's brother-in-law. Its business address was a UPS store mailbox in a strip mall in Ridgeland. It had no employees, no website, no phone number, and no signed contract with Silverbrook Worship Center. The invoice that authorized the transfer had been generated by Quall himself on the church's letterhead software, printed on a Tuesday morning, signed by him in his capacity as senior pastor, and by him again, in a different signature, in his capacity as the sole managing member of Fieldstone Facility Planning. He walked the invoice to the part-time bookkeeper. He told her it was standard early-stage consulting for the building project. She cut the check. The check cleared into a business account at a regional bank in Madison, Mississippi. From that account, over the next 11 days, the funds were moved in 4 transfers into a personal money market account in Phineas Quall's name. From there, they were used to close on a 2-bedroom lakefront cabin on Ross Barnett Reservoir. The purchase price was $214,000. $42,000 of it came out of the building fund. The rest came from a mortgage he took out in the same week. That was the first one. Over the following 4 years, Phineas Quall would repeat that basic pattern 137 times. The shell entities multiplied: Fieldstone Facility Planning LLC, Cornerstone Construction Advisory LLC, Meridian Vision Development Group LLC, Sanctuary Design Partners LLC. Each was registered in Mississippi. Each listed a family member as a registered agent or a mail drop as a business address. Each generated invoices to the Silverbrook Building Fund for services no one at the church ever saw performed. Site feasibility studies, preliminary architectural consulting, contractor pre-qualification research, permitting facilitation, construction sequencing analysis. None of it was real work. The invoices were carefully sized, never large enough in a single transaction to trigger the Elder Board's $10,000 single payment review threshold, never small enough to look casual. $8,000 for a soil study, $9,200 for a traffic impact evaluation, $9,750 for architectural revision consulting. Every one of them entered on the ledger, every one of them below the review line, every one of them paid without question by a bookkeeper who assumed her pastor knew what he was doing. The money that came out of the shell accounts funded a lifestyle that grew steadily but quietly. A $430,000 renovation to the Quall's primary residence in Silverbrook, including a screened outdoor kitchen, a heated saltwater pool, and a downstairs media room finished in cedar paneling. A second lake property in 2022, this one on Sardis Lake, purchased for $386,000. 2 new vehicles, a GMC Yukon Denali and a used Porsche Cayenne, registered in his wife's name. Private school tuition, a hunting lease on a 1,000-acre parcel in Yalobusha County. And through all of it, from the pulpit, he preached the vision. Every 3 or 4 months, he would climb onto the stage on a Sunday morning and show the congregation a set of updated architectural renderings. A 3-dimensional walkthrough of a sanctuary they were told was coming. A drone flyover of the 15-acre parcel the church had purchased in 2018 for the new building site. He would report a running total on giving. He would thank households by name for their sacrifice. He would show a slide of site prep in progress. He would praise the elder board for their stewardship. He would ask the congregation to keep giving. The site itself, out on Old Silverbrook Road, told a different story. Across the 4 years of the campaign, actual construction expenditures paid to any real contractor totaled approximately $340,000. A grading contractor had leveled a portion of the lot. A civil engineering firm had produced a set of preliminary site drawings. A local landscaper had put in a sign, professionally lit, that read, "Future Home of Silverbrook Worship Center, coming soon." That sign had been standing on that lot, unchanged, for close to 3 years. When members asked about the delay, Phineas Quall had answers ready. Permitting was slow with the county. Materials costs had spiked after the pandemic. Their preferred contractor had gone under. They were waiting on a design revision from the architects. The elder board would love to move faster, he would say, but stewardship required patience. Every dollar was being protected. Every dollar was doing what the donors intended. He was standing in front of 2,500 people every Sunday morning and saying that. And on the Tuesday, after every one of those Sundays, more of their money was disappearing. Warren Aldridge had been on the Silverbrook Elder Board for 6 years. He was 57 years old, a commercial real estate developer who had built strip centers, medical office parks, and one small mixed-use project across the northern half of the state for close to 3 decades. He knew what construction cost. He knew what construction looked like when it was actually happening. And by the fall of 2023, something at Silverbrook was bothering him. He had first noticed it at the September Elder Board meeting. Phineas Quall had presented the third quarter building fund summary. Total pledged to date, $10.4 million. Total received, $7.6 million. Total spent on construction and pre-construction, $1.1 million. Warren had written those numbers on a legal pad and stared at them all through the closing prayer. $1.1 million spent on a project that had produced, in more than 3 years, 1 graded lot and a lighted sign. In Warren's professional experience, $1.1 million in real construction and consulting fees should have produced a foundation, structural steel starting to go up, and a permit set closed out with the county. He had walked past the site on a Saturday morning to look. The site had a chain link fence around it. Inside the fence, there was a portable toilet, weeds, and a pile of rebar that had been sitting there long enough to rust. He asked around, quietly. He called a friend at the county permitting office. He learned that the church had pulled a single grading permit in 2021, and nothing since. He called an architect he knew in Jackson. The architect had no record of any active building design being prepared for Silverbrook Worship Center. He asked a construction attorney to explain the normal pace of a $12 million church project. The attorney told him that by the 4th year, absent extreme circumstances, they should be under roof. At the November Elder Board meeting, Warren raised his hand and asked, on the record, for an independent audit of the building fund. Phineas Quall's face went, for one long half-second, entirely still. Then he smiled and thanked Warren for his diligence, and said that of course the board could look at anything they wanted to look at, but that engaging an outside auditor for a project of this size, in the middle of an active campaign, would introduce administrative costs the congregation would rightly question. He suggested instead a supplementary internal review, prepared by his office, delivered before the January meeting. Warren said no. He wanted an outside forensic accountant, not an internal review, not a summary, an outside professional engaged by the Elder Board, reporting directly to the Elder Board. The room went quiet. For the next 3 weeks, the Elder Board's private group text was consumed by a running debate. 2 members wanted to defer to the pastor. 3 wanted the audit immediately. 3 were undecided. Warren pushed. He sent them articles about church fraud cases in Tennessee and Georgia and Alabama. He sent them a copy of the Mississippi statute on nonprofit fiduciary duty. The Elder Board voted on the 2nd Tuesday of December, 5-4 in favor of retaining an outside forensic accountant. The chair called Phineas Quall on his way out of the parking lot to tell him. The pastor's response, according to the chair's later recollection to investigators, was, "I don't understand why we would do this to ourselves." The forensic accounting firm was retained the following Monday. The lead forensic accountant on the engagement was a woman named Rhonda Kessel, a certified fraud examiner based out of Memphis, who had spent 22 years untangling church and nonprofit financial cases across the Mid-South. She had seen every variation: missing petty cash, doctored donation reports, fake mission trip expenses. Building fund diversions were not new to her. She had a checklist she went through in the first meeting with a client, and she was already 3/4 certain what she was going to find before she opened the first bank statement. She started with the source documents, 4 years of building fund deposits, downloaded directly from the church's bank rather than from any internal record. 4 years of building fund disbursements, matched against every invoice on file. 4 years of donor giving statements, generated straight out of the church's donor management software. Then she pulled the shell entities: Fieldstone Facility Planning LLC, Cornerstone Construction Advisory LLC, Meridian Vision Development Group LLC, Sanctuary Design Partners LLC. Every one of them she ran through the Mississippi Secretary of State's public business search. Every one of them came back registered to Phineas Quoll, to Deborah Quoll, or to Deborah's brother, an insurance adjuster in Brandon, who later told federal investigators he had signed his name on incorporation paperwork as a favor and had no idea what the entities actually did. Rhonda pulled every invoice the church had paid to those entities. She matched them against wire records and cashed checks. She traced the funds forward, out of the church operating account, into the shell entity accounts, out of the shell entity accounts, into a personal money market account at a different bank in Deborah Quoll's name. Out of that account, into closings on lake property, into vehicle purchases, into contractor payments on the home renovation, into a hunting lease. She did not need 3 months. She had the picture inside of 11 days. Then she built the exhibit that would define the case. On a single spreadsheet, 16 pages long when printed, Rhonda produced 2 columns. Column A held every restricted building fund donation Silverbrook Worship Center had received across the 4-year window, listed by household, by check number, by online transaction ID, and by the specific donor restriction language attached. Column B held every dollar of building fund money that had actually left the church and gone to a verifiable, arm's-length construction or consulting vendor she had been able to confirm was a real business with real work performed. Column A totaled $7,642,000. Column B totaled $341,000. The gap was $7,301,000, of which $2.8 million had been traced directly into Phineas Quoll's personal financial life. The remainder was still sitting, uninvested, in the building fund account itself, unspent. The construction that column A had been given for was never built. She printed the exhibit and drove down from Memphis on a Thursday morning to present it to the elder board in the same conference room where they had voted for her engagement. Warren Aldridge sat at the head of the table. The cardiologist sat next to him. The retired banker sat across. She walked them through it column by column. She named specific families. The retired couple in the second row, whose $80,000 inheritance gift she could trace, dollar for dollar, into a payment to a swimming pool contractor. A widow's $12,000 bequest that had gone into a Porsche Cayenne. A young couple who had cashed out a portion of their retirement account to pledge $15,000, whose gift had funded, in part, a screened outdoor kitchen. Warren Aldridge, in his later testimony to federal investigators, said that he watched the retired banker, put his face in his hands, and heard him whisper the words, "Dear God, what have we done?" The elder board voted the next morning to place Phineas Quoll on administrative suspension, to notify the FBI's Jackson Field office, and to hold a special congregational meeting to inform the church. The FBI opened its case file the following Monday. The federal agents came for Phineas Quoll on a Wednesday morning in April of 2024 at a Waffle House on the frontage road off Interstate 55, about 6 miles from the church campus. He was there for a scheduled breakfast meeting with a real estate agent he had been talking to about a Third Lake property. The agent, unrelated to any of the investigation, never made it to the table. There were 3 agents. 2 special agents from the FBI's Jackson Field office and 1 from the Mississippi State Auditor's Investigative Division. They walked in through the front door at 8:17 a.m. Phineas Quoll was in a corner booth, drinking coffee, reading something on his phone. The lead agent slid into the seat across from him. "Agent Merritt, Pastor Quoll." "Quoll, good morning. Do I know you?" Agent Merritt, "I'm Special Agent Merritt with the FBI. This is Special Agent Voss, and Investigator Calloway with the state auditor. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, mail fraud, and money laundering related to funds diverted from the Silverbrook Worship Center Building Fund. We'd like you to come with us. Qual. This has to be a misunderstanding. Agent Merritt. We have a signed warrant, sir. The exhibit is more than 300 pages. Qual. There has been a misunderstanding. Every one of those transactions had a legitimate business purpose. The board approved my authority. Agent Merritt. The elder board is the party that requested this investigation, sir. Qual. Then there has been a misunderstanding at the board level. I need to talk to my attorney before I say anything further. Agent Merritt. That's your right. Would you please stand up and put your hands behind your back? He stood up. He put his hands behind his back. He asked if they could avoid using restraints inside the restaurant. Agent Merritt said no. The other diners watched him walk out through the parking lot toward an unmarked SUV. His coffee was still steaming on the table. The federal indictment was returned by a grand jury sitting in the Southern District of Mississippi on the 14th of May, 2024. 51 counts. 23 counts of wire fraud under Title 18. United States Code, Section 1343. 11 counts of mail fraud under Section 1341. 9 counts of money laundering under Section 1956. 8 counts of theft from a nonprofit organization. The remainder covered false statements and conspiracy. We are heading into the courtroom now. Before we do, if this case has held your attention this far, subscribe. This channel covers accountability cases the mainstream press will not touch every single week, and the verdict on this one is going to matter. His initial appearance was held before a United States magistrate judge in the federal courthouse in Jackson 2 days after the arrest. He appeared in a navy suit, no tie, with his wife Deborah in the front row of the gallery and neither of their 2 daughters present. Bond was set at $750,000, secured against the primary Silverbrook residence, the same residence that had been renovated with $200,000 in diverted tithes. His defense counsel was a Jackson attorney named Bo Ridgway, a former assistant United States attorney with 12 years in private practice and a specialty in white-collar defense. Ridgway's initial strategy, telegraphed in early filings, was to challenge the classification of donor-restricted funds under Mississippi civil law, and to argue that Qual's authority as chief executive of the church included the discretion to compensate himself through consulting arrangements. Federal prosecutors, led by Assistant United States Attorney Naomi Persaud, dismantled that argument in their first responsive brief. The donor restriction language on the pledge cards, the campaign brochures, and the offering envelopes was written, dated, and signed by the donors themselves. It was not a policy the church had adopted. It was a legal restriction the donors themselves had imposed as a condition of the gift. Pre-trial motions consumed the balance of 2024. A motion to suppress the forensic accountant's report was denied. A motion to sever the money laundering counts from the fraud counts was denied. A motion to move the trial venue outside the Southern District of Mississippi on grounds of prejudicial pretrial publicity was denied. By late fall, the case was set for jury trial in early 2025. Silverbrook Worship Center, in the meantime, held 3 separate congregational meetings across the summer. Attendance at Sunday services dropped from 2,500 to about 900 within 8 weeks and continued to decline. 60% of the pledged capital campaign giving was formally requested back by the households that had given it. The Elder Board voted in July to place the building project on indefinite hold. The lit sign on Old Silverbrook Road came down at the end of August. The church's insurance carrier declined coverage on the diverted funds, citing a criminal act exclusion. The Elder Board sued Phineas Qual civilly in Mississippi State Court for restitution of the full traced $2.8 million, plus punitive damages. That case, as of the filing of the federal indictment, remains pending, with a lien recorded against the Silverbrook residence and both lake properties. The retired couple in the second row, whose $80,000 inheritance gift had funded, in part, the swimming pool renovation, gave a statement to a Jackson television reporter that ran on the 10 o'clock news the week after the indictment. The husband spoke for both of them. His words, on camera, were these: "That was my wife's mother's money. She saved it her whole life. She gave it to us because she wanted her grandchildren to worship in a real church. He knew whose money it was. He knew where it came from, and he built himself a pool with it." The federal criminal trial is currently on the calendar for the summer of 2025. Under the applicable federal sentencing guidelines, based on a loss amount of $2.8 million and the aggravating factors of abuse of a position of trust, sophisticated means, and the number of victims, the presentence recommendation range, if he is convicted at trial, is expected to fall between 135 and 168 months in federal custody, between 11 and 14 years. He remains, as of this recording, on pre-trial release. He lives in the Silverbrook home he renovated with diverted tithes, under a lien filed by the church he built his career at, waiting for the trial that will decide the rest of his life. His preaching license has been revoked by the state convention. His name has been removed from the Silverbrook Worship Center website, the campaign brochures, and the framed photographs that used to hang in the church lobby. Warren Aldridge, who asked for the audit, still attends what remains of the congregation. He was elected chair of the elder board in September. In a statement he made to the church at his election, he said only this: "We were told for 4 years that the building was coming. What was actually coming was the truth. We failed to ask sooner. We will not fail again. This case was staggering. But this next case, right here on your screen, is somehow even worse. Click it now."